Hello. Thanks to Sean and the entire Washington College GIS staff. Glad that you all can join us today. My name is Andrew, and I work at the Maryland Department of Transportation in the Planning Secretary's office near BWI Airport. I provided that as a bit of geographic reference. Today, I actually live on the Eastern Shore as well, so I am a Eastern Shore resident along with Washington College. Today, as part of the 2020 Washington College GIS program, I'm going to explain how an agency or team can get the most out of using a very cool and relatively new tool called ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud. Now, I obviously can't go through everything in 30 minutes or so, but I'm going to quickly introduce the product and its installation, highlight the main features, and share how this has worked for us, and then walk through a couple of quick demos. I should point out that this presentation will go over mainly the user's experience. Although I will discuss the installation and use at a high level, I do recommend checking out Esri's YouTube presentations that provide a more general overview of the capabilities of the product and how to use all of the features. So my main goal with this presentation is to plant the seed of this product in your mind and let you know that it's out there. So if after my presentation you think it would be useful for you, Google it, download it, watch the tutorials, and play around with it. It's a lot of fun. It's very useful. And very basically, if you have an ArcGIS account and you use Adobe Creative Cloud at all, you can use this. It's out there and it's ready for immediate use. There is a quick picture of me so you can put a face to the voice. That was my temporary COVID mustache back in end of March. I was used for social distancing, and that's me with my daughter Penelope. I guess the social distancing aspect worked a little too well, so I have since shaved it. So let's get going here. So who are we? It says who are you, who are we, why am I speaking to you today? Well, I believe cartography should be a collaborative, welcoming, supportive, and fun. And this extension is terrific, so I want to share our experience with you. We have used this product for several years. First, we used it in beta, and now it's out in full. We continue to use it. It keeps getting updated. We've worked through all the iterations. Our work has been featured in the Arc News edition when we were first using the initial release of it back in the end of 2018. We received a Special Achievement in GIS or SAG award from Esri in 2019, and then very recently our work was recognized as a winner of the 2020 ArcGIS Maps for Adobe competition. And I say all this not as a pat on our back in any way, but just as a way to say that we have experience using this tool and we want to share it with you. So let's get into it. There's one really easy way or one way to think about this is there's two ways to use this great tool, and they're separate but related examples. I should mention also, don't worry about screen capturing. I'm going to provide my contact at the end of this, and I'd love to hear from any and all of you with follow-up questions. We're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A, and the presentation will be put online. So back to the content here. This is a great and important way to think about the extension. There are two ways to use the extension, and the first way is what I'm going to demo first, and it's very new. It is what I refer to as the push method. It was very, very recently released. In fact, it's only about a couple of months old. And that's when this tool went from good to fantastic by adding this ability. And I think that most of you that are listening in on this presentation today will be more familiar with this workflow. This is for users that are more versed in GIS than Illustrator. So it's more for the GIS crowd. And again, I refer to this new method as the push method. And the reason I do that is because you push your work from ArcGIS Pro into Illustrator. So we're going to do the second demo at the end, but that's kind of an opposite. But one thing about this extension that applies to both the push and the pull, so I said both methods here, the steps to use this product, both methods. Before you use the product, you have to actually get the product. So to install the extension itself is free. You just Google it and download it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Here's the link. I'm not going to click on it. This is exactly what it looks like. But when you look at these slides later, the link's there, or again, you can just Google it. So let's get into the first demo here. Let's do the push demo. So for the push demo, this is again when you start in ArcGIS and you push it out to Illustrator. And so I'm going to open up, hopefully most of you are familiar with this. This is the ArcGIS Pro screen. And I started it off just as is, so there's no hidden surprises here. I haven't brought in anything. For MDOT, the default base map is the dark gray canvas or the dark gray canvas reference, and it's zoomed to the state of Maryland. I'm going to add just a little bit of data so we can go through this, and I'm going to walk you through this extension. So first thing, let's change this base map. The dark gray canvas that I'm using right here, it actually is available in vector, but the one that I have here is not the vector form. What you want to use ideally for using this extension is a vector base map. And if you open up the base map panel here, the selections on ArcGIS Pro, if it has the little V here, that stands for vector. And since Adobe Illustrator is a vector editing program, it's best if you can pull in a vector base map. And the reason why you want to do this is when you get it into Illustrator and you're using Illustrator again, a vector editing software, you can change the appearance and the styles of not just the background, but some of the elements in here, so the water and the roads and the symbology and whatnot. So I'll go over that, so we're going to bring in the world navigation map as our base map, and then we're going to bring in some data. I'm not going to bring in a lot for the presentation, but I'm just going to show you what we can do here. So I am signed in here, so I can go to my content, and I have uploaded some of this, the data that we're going to use for this. The most recent project that we have worked on at the state was a truck parking study in which we examined trucks that have been parking all along the roadways in Maryland. It's actually kind of a problem because truck drivers have not found enough parking lots that have availability for them, so they've been parking on exit ramps and on shoulders, which, as you can imagine, is a danger. So when we were doing the plan for the study, we have identified the regional routes where this is most problematic. We have 2 U.S. routes, 50 and 301, and 3 interstates, 95, 70, and 68. So I have uploaded this data into our AGOL account, and I've pulled that in. Those are the regional routes. And then there's another data set that I use for quite a bit. I put it in my hosted services. It is the Maryland boundary, and it's cleaned up. It's not the detailed boundary, so I bring that in. So we've got that. So this is all vector based. We've got this, and this is really it. You don't have to do any of the artwork or designing here in ArcGIS Pro. You can do all of this in Illustrator. So for the sake of time, I've already made the layout tab here in ArcGIS Pro. It's very simple. I did an 8.5 by 11 landscape orientation, and we've got our data sources here. So this is where you start to actually use this extension, because prior to this on the demo, all of what I've done you may be familiar with just using ArcGIS Pro. So if you go to layout here under share, you can export it as all of your favorite different formats here. You can do JPEG, PDFs, PNG files, all of that stuff. There's a new one when you update ArcGIS and you download the extension. It's AIX, which is for Adobe Illustrator interface file. And you pick a location where you're going to put this, the same as usual, and you export it. Now to save all of, a minute or two that it would take to export it, I've already exported it for us. It is the Washington College push layout. But again, if you wanted to open it, if you just exported it, here's the AIX file, and you would just bring that in. And if you are familiar with both ArcGIS Pro and Illustrator, you should be delighted to see this, because over here on the side, they have taken all of what we had to go back to ArcGIS Pro, all of the layers and data that we have over here, and this extension has laid them out in Adobe Illustrator with the same titles and put them into separate layers here, which is quite helpful. So let's get to it. First thing, I guess they have to do this legally, but these things were always annoying to me, these giving the credit to the base map. So with Illustrator, you can just very easily take those 2 layers and get rid of them. So we got rid of that. So everything is nested in this map frame. The first thing that I want to show you is a tool to make the state of Maryland jump out. So it's pretty clear that this is the Maryland boundary generalized clean layer. So let's take this, and I take it by I'm on a PC, but Alt, and then I grab the layer, and then Control X, which is cut. Let's put a new layer above this so it's not nested. Control Alt V to paste in place. And we've got ourselves just the state of Maryland vectorized form. And as I'm going to show you, we're going to make a mask. So we're going to mask the rest of the area out. So we're going to have the state of Maryland being a window. And I don't want to lose that state of Maryland, so I'm going to make a quick copy of it. Again, Control C, Control Shift V. So now we've got two layers of the state of Maryland. We're just going to be looking at one for now. So to make this a mask, to have this other area here kind of grayed out so we can see the extent around Maryland, but not have it be the focus, let's make a rectangle around everything. Actually, let me put this into a new layer myself. So make one more layer here. Let's make a rectangle. Drag it over here so it's the entire canvas. And it's red because red was the last fill color I used. It's also got a red stroke. We'll take off the stroke and let's just make it a different color so we can see it a little bit easier. It's actually fine if we use the same color, but just for illustrative purposes, let's make it something else. Let's say it's going to be blue for now. All right, great. So now we've got this blue rectangle, takes up the whole canvas, and we've got the state of Maryland. And this canvas is the same size that we had pushed out in ArcGIS Pro. So again, it's 8.5 by 11 at the landscape orientation. Now we've got the rectangle and we've got the vector format for the state of Maryland. Now what we want to do is make the state of Maryland kind of a window here. So there's this really neat set of tools in Adobe Illustrator called the Pathfinder tools. So let's open that window here. It's under Window, Pathfinder, and there's several different selections here. You can think of them a lot like Clip in ArcGIS Pro. So they either like Clip, or there's symmetrical difference, or there's several different analysis tools, but you can do them just in Illustrator so they're graphic and they don't create new files. So to use this, we're going to use the minus front under here, under the Pathfinder. It says minus front. So we've got the background here, which is the canvas, and we've got the state of Maryland vector. I'm highlighting both of them, so Illustrator knows that we're grabbing both. You can see that here as it's outlined. And then we're going to go to this minus front, and what we're going to do is we're going to knock out that state of Maryland. So hit that, and boom, it's gone. And this is why I created the other copy of the state of Maryland, because when I did that, it got rid of that one. So we can, now that layer is actually empty. So now what we have is, instead of that entire rectangle for the state of Maryland, we have its mask. And I'm going to illustrate this by showing that it's created a window, and you can see that if you click on the layer that's below it, the map frame, you see that that cutout area that we got rid of, the minus front, is acting like a window, so we can see down on what is below, and in this case it is the vector map. I can go ahead and rename these and call this mask, and let's call this Maryland. All right, so we got the red Maryland, we got the mask, and beneath the mask we have the vector map. Now I'm just going to come back to this state of Maryland. Again, if we're looking at that, we want to be able to draw the user's eye into the state of Maryland. We want to have the rest of this area here as context, but we really want to draw the user's eye into the state of Maryland. So going back to this mask, blue is, it doesn't really matter what color the first time, but let's do something that will actually look like a mask. So let's go over here and choose, like, let's say a dark gray here. And then I'm going to just cut the opacity in half. There we go. So now you can see that the state of Maryland is lighter than the rest of it. If you really want me to emphasize that, we can make it darker. You can even do black. I guess that's dark red. We could do black here. And again, since it's 50%, it's kind of set back there in the back. So our mask now is black, set at 50% opacity. So our eyes are drawn into the state of Maryland. But I want it really to pop. I don't want it just to rely on the light to dark contrast. It would be neat if we could make it kind of have a 3D effect. So let's go back to this, turn off these other layers, and we're going to go back to just the state of Maryland. So if we grab this, highlight everything, let's add an effect to it. One of the effects that we use at MDOT for a lot of our maps is, go to the effect window here, stylize is what we call an outer glow. So the default for outer glow is the mode of screen, but you can do a whole bunch of different modes. And once you get into Illustrator, perhaps you already know this, you can play around and see the different functions of each one. But let's just do the normal for now. Out of the box opacity, 75%, and it's about 7.07 inches for the blur. So we're just gonna, that looks pretty good. Let's just take that. That's out of the box. So now we've got this state of Maryland popping. And again, if we add our friend the mask, you can still see it's popping over that, and the vector map. So we still got that, but we want to be able to have that 3D glow effect, but still be able to see the regional routes. What happened to all that stuff there behind? We don't want the red. So to get rid of the red, but still keep that glow effect, we can't just turn off the opacity, because that will turn off the opacity for all of the glow. So what we need to do is go into the Appearance tab here. Again, for simplicity, let's get rid of this stroke. We don't actually need a stroke. So we have the fill here is in red. Let's add another fill. So we have a top fill and we have this bottom fill. Now for this top fill, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the opacity completely. So this fill is still here, it's red, but you actually can't see it because it's an opacity of 0. This fill down here is the one that has the outer glow. So if we come up here to Compound Path, this is a very cool tool that I just learned by trial and error and Googling, but we use it all the time at MDOT. You go to the window of Transparency after selecting a compound path that has more than one fill or perhaps a fill and a stroke. Go over to Transparency, and there's this cool tool called Knockout Group. And as the hovering hint shows you, it prevents the elements of a group from showing through each other. So we want to be able to see down underneath here to the vector there below. So we're going to knock that red out. So it's called Knockout Group. You hit it twice for the check mark. It's kind of a double check there. And now we've got Maryland as just a 3D outline, which is pretty neat. So we can just call this the Maryland 3D glow. And let's bring back our friend the mask. So we're still glowing above the mask, but it may look white, but what it actually is transparent because we knocked it out. So I'll show you that when we bring on this. And there we have it. So pretty quick, pretty simple. You got the state of Maryland. It is popping out from the background pretty clearly without adding a legend or anything else. You know that this map is featuring the state of Maryland while also giving context. So you can do all of this stuff in ArcGIS Pro, but it's going to create some extra files. It's going to do some processing. It's going to take a little bit longer. Once you get comfortable with Illustrator, this stuff is a lot easier, but previously it was kind of difficult to get all that stuff from ArcGIS into Illustrator. So this extension makes that easier. One last thing I want to show you on this example is if you are like us and you do a lot of charts and infographics and whatnot in Excel, this is from that same study. I'm going to grab this one, just grab the line chart that I made in Excel, Control C, bring it over here. Let's make a layer for the chart. You can even call it chart. And then Control V, boom, there it is. And you could just leave it like that, but I'm going to be picky. I want to kind of see behind this chart. I want it to float. I want it to look a little bit more professional than that. So if you go back to this transparency window, there's no transparency on it now. It's at normal. If you do multiply, what it does is kind of blends the two colors together and it keeps the features up front while getting rid of that background white, because it's not really a white, it was just the background color. So now you've got the lines in here and you've got the title and all that, and it's starting to look a little bit better, but it's hard to read. So we got the chart here. Let's make a background for the chart. Again, let's get our friend the rectangle tool here. Just draw a rectangle behind the chart. When I say behind, it's below because it's an Illustrator. Red was the last color I used for the last fill color, so that's what remains. We don't want it to be red, obviously. I want it to be something like this background. So you could just grab one of those screen capture tools and get the actual hex value. In my library here, I've got similar colors. Let's use that one. So that made the background, and now if you want to see through it, let's dial this back to 75%. It looks pretty good, so you can still see the map there. And then you can still do those fun effects, like let's do the outer glow again. So hey, so now that's popping too a little bit. Obviously this isn't completed, but we're pretty far, and it's it hasn't been a terribly long demonstration. So that is the push method. And when I get to the pull method, I'm going to show you why we are using the vector-based map. But let's go back to the presentation. So that was the push demo. Now we are going to go on to the pull demo here. And the pull demo it's the other method, and I refer to it as a pull demo because what you're going to do is you don't even have to fire up ArcGIS Pro. You are just going to use Illustrator and bring in your work. You can even bring in shape files directly into Illustrator. You don't have to use ArcGIS Pro at all. And this presentation really is not going to focus on this, but if you bear with me, I'm going to go through the 4 basic steps really quickly. And we've already done the first step, which is the installation. Bear with me a second here. All right, so that first step was the install. We have to do that for either method. But now let's do the 3 other steps for the pull method. The first one is to define the map extent. So after installing it, you define the map extent. I'm going to go over this in the demo, but as an overview, this is where you would select the geographic extent, the scale, and the size of the map. I'm going to do a cooking metaphor for these steps. So this is like gathering the ingredients to cook a meal, but there's no cooking going on yet. So this is not a preview of the map. Again, I'm going to go over this in the demo, but that's what you keep in mind here. The first thing you do is you define the extent. The next step is to compile and preview the content. So this is where you actually cook the meal. The layers in the data now start to take shape, and you can grab them from ArcGIS Online. If you have a URL to IMAP or other services online, you can do REST services, bring them in, or you can even pull in a shapefile if you've zipped it up. Then you would pull all of that data into the extent that you prepared in the last step. So for the cooking metaphor, it's like looking into the oven to see the map come to life, or the meal. So this step is a preview of the map. And then finally, the last step for using this method of the extension is the download sync. This is where you push all of the extent and all of the content into Adobe to finalize the design. So the ingredients and the materials are all there now. You just need to finalize it. So to keep that cooking metaphor going one more time, this is where you'd be pulling the map out of the oven and you start to plate it, set the table, add the garnishes. And this is where Adobe shines, after all, is with design. It's a design software. So let's do the second demo, the pull demo. And again, this is the classic way to use the extension. So if I would have done this presentation 2 months ago, this would have been the only way to use this extension. And it's a great way to use the extension. You can do everything that you need to do with it, but it's more catered to individuals who are more familiar with Illustrator and less with GIS. But let's walk through it. You do not have to have any real design elements ready to go, just the data. You can do everything in Illustrator. All right, for the second demo, we are going to do the pull method. So with this one, I'm not even going to fire up ArcGIS Pro. Everything is done in Illustrator. So this is Illustrator right when you open it. We're going to do you could do a new file and start it blank, or you can just go up here and once it's installed, you do Window, Extensions, ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud. Let's open up the extension. When it opens up, there's 2 windows, the map boards window and the compilation window. We're going to go through both of them, but if you remember from the 4 steps for the pull method, the first step is to define the extent, and you do that in the map boards window. So we're going to use this tool called Draw, and we're going to grab the state of Maryland like this, and then this window automatically opens up here. You can call this whatever you want, but the default is always map board. So if you don't want a whole bunch of map boards in your files, call it whatever your project is. I'm just going to call this one Washington College. And now here's where it gets useful to pay attention to defining the extent. You can define the extent either by the media size, so the canvas, or you can do a specific scale. So if you have a scale that you need, you can do that. For this one, this is what we usually use at MDOT because we're doing a lot of plans. We lay them out in paper files. So we do a lot of plans or grant applications, and they're usually take up the entire page. So again, we do that 8.5 by 11 at a landscape orientation. So here it pops up too. You can do it as a preset. And the scale it sets to whatever I drew it on initially. So let's look at this. So that looks pretty good, but excuse me, we're missing some of the down there by Ocean City and Assateague. We're missing some of that land. So let's take this and drag it out a little bit. Now, if you go back into that same window, we've still got the 11 by 8.5, but the scale's changed a little bit. But it's always, since we're setting the artboard size or the canvas size, this is going to stay intact while the scale will change. And then you can also move the area. So say I want to get a little bit more in there from Garrett County. You can get it as tight as you can. For our intents and purposes, we just want to see the state of Maryland, so we've got that. So now what we have done is we have defined the geographic extent. We've set in our case, the media size. It corresponds to the scale, but we've set that. And now we've got the ingredients ready. So let's go and get some data that we want to do. So to do that, we preview and add content, which reopens up this compilation window. And for this extension, the default base map in the compilation window is always the topographic map, which is, I think, quite a lovely, beautiful base map. But if you recall from the push method, we really want to use a vector if we can. So let's start adding content. You go up here, add content. You can add a whole bunch of stuff. Again, I'm going to go over some of the best or most commonly used practices. So you open up the window here to add layers, and they being the extension has it laid out for you. So you can pull in data from Living Atlas of the World, from ArcGIS Online. The Maps or Creative Cloud has curated some data layers that work particularly well with the extension, your organizations that you're belonging to, and my favorite is my favorites, because then you can pull in layers that you use a lot and stick them in here. I use that vector street map, the same one that we used for the push method quite a bit. So let's add that with the plus button here. And I also use that county, that same one. Does this look familiar? Yeah, I use that a lot. So let's add that. And then that regional, let's see if we can find that regional routes. And again, I've just created this data and I've uploaded it to ArcGIS Online, so it's available. So now we've got the same data that we used for that push method. Put them all in here. They do not have a maximize window button, which I think is kind of peculiar. So you have to drag the window to make it as large as you want. But you can see all what's going on here. These are the routes. They're individual: US Route 50, US Route 301. And now you can come in here and you can change the style of each one. And this works a lot like ArcGIS Online. If you're familiar with making any online maps or story maps, it's the same interface here. And so you can change the appearance if you want within this extension. What I prefer to do most of the time is just to go ahead and sync it down into ArcGIS, or into Adobe Illustrator, excuse me, and then do the stylization there. A couple of other quick things I want to show you. You can look at the map settings, and this is nice. They've added different ways for you to project your map. It used to be only the web markator, which is what you see on your phone for most maps. It's pretty much the standard all around, but it's not great if you're making plans or doing maps that are specific to an area. So what we use at MDOT is the state plane for Maryland. There it is. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to reproject it into the Maryland state plane. It's going to say error, but oh, that's because the spatial reference is different. That's similar to an error that you would get in ArcGIS Pro. It's simply reprojecting it, but the vector street map was originally made not using that projection. But so now we have it in the Maryland state plane. You can also go into the processes. I'm not adding symbols right now, but you can go in here and you can change the symbols. So it would change all of the point symbols, for instance, all at one time. If, for instance, you wanted to do a show where all the Starbucks were in the state of Maryland, you could go in and add the data for Starbucks and match it up with a symbol that you have in Adobe that is the Starbucks emblem, and it would change all of them. You can add a map scale if you need the scale bar. You can also add a map legend, which is pretty nice. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that stuff right now. I'm just going to go in and do the actual demo. But I wanted to show you that that was available. So we have the state of Maryland here. This is the extent we want, and we've added the data that we needed for this. It's all in here, and so we would sync it. And by syncing it, it just downloads it into Illustrator, and you can manipulate it. And to save the perhaps 1 to 2 minutes that it would take to sync it, I have it saved here as the pull layout. Let's open that up. And this is what it looks like once it sinks down. Again, we've got all of the data in different layers here laid out very nicely. It's very similar to the push layout. It's just a different way of getting it. I think that using this particular method is quite nice when you want a map that is a particular canvas size, or if you've already uploaded all of the data that you need. Since I've gone through some of the ways that you can use Illustrator to make maps appear a little bit better, what I'm going to show you right now is something that you could use in both the push method and the pull method. What we have here, again, is the vector base map. So as you can see, as I move my mouse around here, it has vectorized what appeared to be an image file, but it's actually a vector file. So you can see that the different backgrounds here, even the state of Maryland, we've got park areas, the waters. These are all different vector files that you can grab, and even the text here and the symbols for the roads. So let's get into, I want to show you a quick trick on how to restylize this pretty easily. That's pretty neat. If you go down here under the vector street map, it has separated, it being the extension, has separated, this is points of interest, transportation, it's separated a lot of these different elements into their own layers. So we have oceans and water areas. So if you select the oceans, it's going to grab the Atlantic Ocean. And if we wanted to change the color of the ocean, we could do that. But what if we wanted to change the color of all of the water? Instead of having to grab every layer that has water in it, one neat trick is you can use the direct select tool, which is a shortcut of A. It's the white arrow. You can grab that, and you can see that right here, that's the color that we have selected. And if you come up here to the select menu, you can say select same fill color, and it's going to select everything in the document that has that same fill color. And let's say we wanted to make it this brighter blue. So we can do that, and now all of a sudden all of the water in the entire document is made that brighter blue. And another thing that is what I wanted to show you, another trick that we use quite a bit, is if you go back and if you have that selected again, so again, select same fill color. If we wanted to add an effect that is called inner glow, you can do that. And this is kind of fun because you can play around with it to make it look like it is, there's a shoreline. So you can change it from the edge to the center. And let's say we do, you play around with the distances here. You can get it a little bit more how you want it. I'm not going to finish it off today, but just to give you that idea that you can play with this and you can add some depth, and you can even change the color that you're using the inner glow for. So some fun things to play with. This is what Illustrator does really well. And it's not just the water, obviously. If you wanted to grab the parks and you wanted to change those colors or all the green areas, what they have identified here as land use, they have park monuments. You can again go up here, select the same color, fill color, and select all of that, and then you can change that green to, say, a more darker green here. But that is it. That is what I wanted to show you for the pull method. To finish it off here, we go back. And this, if you're going to take one photo of any of any of these slides today, this would be the one. Again, this whole presentation is going to be available online, but here's the URL to get the extension. Again, it's the extension itself is actually free, some quick tutorials, and here is my contact, and I would be glad to help and hear about your experiences. And also, we have some time to do some question and answers, I believe. I will turn it back over to Sean. Thanks, everybody.